everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I'm so honored to be joined by legitimately, I say this a lot, but legitimately one of my favorite guests, the Executive Director of the Central Penn College Education Foundation, Sandy Box. Sandy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. It's great.
You know, we are so excited to have you on. Of course, we have you on twice a year, every time the Central Penn College Education Foundation scholarship application is open. So we want to talk today about not only what the question is, a little bit more about some of the nuts and bolts of the scholarship application, like the aspect of the Stabler Foundation, but we also want to focus in on the question at hand for this term, and we'll have our other special guest here break that down a little bit. And without further ado, our other special guest would be, of course, Nightly News President, Abby Bresky. Abby, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Don't be so excited.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Abby, it's always such a pleasure to have you. And of course, Abby is our esteemed Nightly News President, at least for the last couple of terms that she is here before she gets ready to walk across the stage. Abby is one of our indispensable members and just a wonderful addition to our team, and has really jumped in headfirst for our sports as well. Abby, you're going to be doing photography and post-game interviews for our baseball team, so that's going to be something that's really cool. I hope you're looking forward to that.
I am looking forward to it. I think it's something you think about as a kid, but it's just cool to get that experience to report on sports and be on the field.
That's right.
So we absolutely appreciate all of your efforts. So we're going to start off with the scholarship is now open. It's been open since February the 5th. It does close on March the 1st. So just keeping that, of course, I'll probably announce that again. But we want to talk a little bit about the foundation and some of the facts from previous years. You know, Sandy, I want to start off with this question. In my classes, I compel my students to do the scholarship application because, for one, I think that it's honestly a travesty that really it's only about 15 to 20% of our students, and that might be high, actually apply for this even though they're eligible. Why do you think that is?
You know, it's not just here, because I worked at a college prior to coming here and was responsible for the scholarships there. And again, it's always a struggle to get people to apply for free money. I don't know why, except for I think that the word essay kind of freaks people out. And I'm not really sure why, because our essays, as anybody who has completed them knows, it's about them. So they shouldn't be freaked out. It's just about you. That's it. You can write about you anytime.
I think what's interesting is a lot of times, especially here, we are under accelerated program.
Right.
Maybe it just doesn't reach the top of the priority list. And especially since you've got that month almost that it's open, people are like, I'll get to it. And then maybe they forget, or maybe during that last week, they're in the middle of midterms or something like that, and it just doesn't register. So it's something that I have really spent a lot of time in all of my classes. I'm sure people like Abby, who have had me dozens of times, will say that she's probably sick of hearing about it now because she knows she could recite all of these things that I'm talking about. Certainly in today's society, a lot of discussion about higher education does revolve around the cost.
Right.
But what I always try to share with my students is it doesn't necessarily have to be. Yes, college is going to be expensive. I mean, Sandy, I'm still a student, hopefully till the end of this year, and then I'll be walking across that stage myself. But you think it's sort of the path of least resistance, right? We go to financial aid, we fill out our FAFSA, and we sign.
Right.
And that's how we pay for our education. So that's easy, but it's certainly not the best way to go about it, that's for sure.
No, because, yes, it's very easy. You walk in, you sign the papers, you walk away. You're going to pay for that later. Those loans that you take out have interest. It's just like a credit card, just like a car payment, whatever the case may be. Everything has interest on it. The grants, the scholarships that you apply for, no interest. Interest-free money. It just doesn't get any easier than that.
So, Abby, I want to talk to you a little bit about your involvement with this. You have been here for a couple of years now, and obviously every single time have filled out the scholarship application. Just off the top of your head, if you had to make a guess, how much money do you believe that you've been awarded since you started here?
I haven't really thought about it like that, I guess. And it's been like different amounts. So I really couldn't tell you. I really have no idea.
So, I mean, I know just in general, just knowing what I know about you, I mean, I know that you're fairly regularly in the top 10 to 15. So
Right.
it has to, let's just say, fair to say, considerable amount.
Yeah.
Probably paid for a significant portion of your education.
For sure.
And so I think that's what I try to impart, especially in freshman students,
Right.
that, listen, even if it is a $500, $1,000, even $2,000 that you get, if you do it every single time over the course of your education, it's going to add up to a significant amount.
Right.
Now, Sandy, in previous terms that we have done this, I guess summer would have been the last time, how many applicants did we have?
Okay, so it was open in August, and so those funds then were awarded for the fall term. We had 110, I'm sorry, because we had some person, however they were able to, they submitted it twice. But so we had 110 applicants, and out of the 110 applicants, 97 received a scholarship of some sort.
That's incredible.
Right, and the values go between 500 and 2,000, but that's twice a year that you can apply for that. So $500 even twice a year, that's $1,000 that you don't have to pay. If you're lucky enough to get the $2,000 one, which is 9 times out of 10 the Stabler Foundation one, now you're talking $4,000. That's a big chunk of change, people, when you're talking about having to pay it back. So 88%, that breaks down to 88% of the applicants received some type of scholarship assistance.
That is so amazing.
Yes. So, I mean, it's just crazy. And I would say on the average that it was $1,000. That's about the average scholarship. I mean, we do have the $500 ones and we have the $2,000, but the most basic scholarships are usually right around $1,000.
And if you think about, that covers almost one of your classes per
Right.
term. If you do that twice a year, that's 2 classes. If you do it 3 years, that's 6 classes of the, say, 40 that you need for a
Right.
bachelor's degree. That's a significant part. I
Right.
mean, that's like 20% of my
Right.
math. I'm just doing off the top of my head here. But that's like 20%. And to your point, you don't have to pay interest on that
Right.
money. So it ultimately ends up being much more than that.
Right,
I think
exactly.
that's a big thing.
Right, it
the
is.
interest, because I feel like a lot of us get to that point where we're about to graduate, and you get to that, we have 6 months, and then you look at the interest rate, and you're like, oh, this isn't going to be good. Like that.
My daughter graduated 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I hate to say this, and she did not borrow a lot of money, and she's still paying on student loans. So, I mean, it's 10, 15 years later, still student loans. It can last a long, long time. So any opportunity that you have to reduce the amount that you have to pay back, interest-free, I mean, it's just a no-brainer to me. It's free money, and it takes you a half an hour. I mean, it's a half an hour of your time to write about you.
For
About
an
yourself.
80% chance at $500 at a
Right.
minimum.
Exactly.
I mean, that's pretty darn good. So let's just talk about real quick, because I do get this question a lot, and I just want some clarification. What are the specific application criteria? Meaning, what are sort of the things that Central Penn students have to have in order to be awarded a scholarship?
Okay, so they have to have at least a 2.0. That's the minimum. Because what our donors want to do is they want to support students who are making academic progress but have financial needs. So a 2.0 shows that you are trying, you're doing your best. Well, I won't say you're doing your best. Let's just be honest now. I'm saying 2.0, you're trying. I'm just being real.
I think that's fair.
Right. You have to be, of course, enrolled. And I will say that you have to be in good standing with regard to your behavior on campus. If there are known disciplinary problems, even if you score very high in your scholarship application review process, that's the kind of information that we use in the selection committee that we discuss. It's if we know that you're very good in the classroom as far as getting good grades, but your behavior outside of the classroom does not warrant being rewarded for.
It doesn't reflect the core values of
Right.
Central Penn College.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's easy. It's 2.0. Oh, and you have to make certain that you have completed your FAFSA, because that's the only way that we can determine whether or not there is a financial need. And that's just it's just a guideline, really. So even if your family income is more than $100,000, still complete the FAFSA, fill out the application because you just don't know, because there are so many. It's one application that the student completes, but there are multiple scholarships within the Education Foundation that all have different criteria, whether it's the GPA, whether it is the county in which you live, the major in which you're enrolled, if you're involved with a specific club on campus. I mean, there are so many different things that are taken into consideration when we award the scholarships.
I'd like to take a little peek behind the curtain, because always one of my favorite hour to hour and a halves of my term when we have scholarships is the scholarship selection committee. And of course,
Right.
I don't want to go into a ton of detail about that, but I will say that essentially what we try to do is talk about the people who have applied and
Right.
have made a significant contribution
Right.
to campus. So for instance, when Abby's name comes up, of course, not only, of course, you know her as
Right.
well, but of course, I am there advocating on her behalf
Right.
based on the things that I see her do both in the classroom as part of the West Shore Connect program and with athletics and the nightly news. So I am able to share that. So we have people from all across the college in different walks of life, whether they're faculty or staff, and we can sort of nominate somebody and throw out and make our case, and then make sure that they're a deserving recipient of the award. What I also think is really interesting, Sandy, is you do have, I can't even guess how many different scholarships. So for us, it's like, is this person okay to get an award, and then you have the tough job of trying to figure out which
Which one
scholarship they're going to get.
Right.
And there are different qualifications, and there are
Right.
different. One of them I know that the donors request to meet the students,
Right.
which I think is really cool and unique. But of course, you want to put the right person in front of those donors as well. So there's a lot of thought that goes into this.
There's a lot of moving parts with the distribution of the scholarships, but it's all good. I mean, and like I said, everything is. There's a committee. When a student fills out the application, it's submitted, and then it automatically is sent out to 5 different evaluators. So 5 different people get to review this application, score it on their, and everybody scores things differently. Although, there's a rubric that they follow. Some people put more weight on grammar. Others put more weight on the financial needs. Some may put more weight on the major that you're enrolled in because it's near and dear to their heart. But all in all, when you have 5 people reviewing it, it's so funny how they all come back with very similar scores. Every now and then you'll have that one that just throws the average out the window, but it doesn't happen that often. So I think that's great because 5 different people get to review the scholarship. They don't see your name on the scholarship when
All
you're-
anonymous,
when
yeah.
they're, right, when they're reviewing it. All they see is the major, your GPA, your family size. I think it shows, I should know because I look at them all the time, where you're from, like, the Harrisburg, something like that. So, I mean, they get to see that, but really it's just, did you answer the question? And did you answer the question, did you take the time to really answer the question, or did you just put an answer down? That's the difference. The difference is you can put an answer down and submit the application, but when you're being reviewed, people want to know what it is. They want to know about you. They want to learn about you. That's the only thing that they can really score on when they're looking at the essay.
Absolutely. One of the key things that I always make a point to bring up here, Sandy, and that is this there's a spot in the center of the application about the Stabler Foundation, and it just basically you have to agree to the terms. Now, essentially what it's saying is that you have a moral obligation that down the road, because of this scholarship that you are getting, you are going to pay it forward when you are in your career and a little bit more financially stable. I think the problem is a lot of times the people who finish at the top don't check this box and therefore are ineligible for some of the biggest prizes. This is not a financial obligation. Sandy is not keeping, well, you do keep records to a certain extent, but
But I'm not calling anybody to say, hey, you owe me money.
right. You're not a collections agency.
No, I am not.
It's just a moral obligation of, listen, somebody thought so much of you to give you the scholarship. Would you consider down the road giving back to the Central Penn College Education Foundation? And again, it happens almost every term. There's someone in the top 10 or 15. They just didn't check the box. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the bigger awards do come from, to your earlier point. So I just want to point out, anyone listening, please make sure that you click the box under my pledge to Donald and Dorothy Stabler Foundation. Of course, read the information.
Right, exactly.
But click that box.
Absolutely, because here's what happens. You won't hear from me until you graduate. Then once you graduate, I will send you a letter once a year. That's it, just once a year, saying, hey, remember how you felt when you got that scholarship? When you have the opportunity, start paying it back. And I'm not asking for a lump sum.
Right.
You want to pay $10 a month? That's great. You want to pay $20 a month? I don't care. It's just it's the way to get you started, to pay it forward, so other people might reap the benefits that you reaped while you were here. So because if we don't fundraise, if we don't bring in more money, then there will be no money.
Right.
I mean, that's just the way it goes. And that's really what the Stabler Foundation was trying to do, is like they give money, but they want to make sure that what their donation is making an impact. And the way that they measure how an impact that it's making is if those people pay it forward.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Well, just a couple more things I want to talk about here before we head out for the day. I want to talk about the question.
Yes.
And the question this term is, what motivates you to pursue your academic and career goals, and how do you stay focused on them?
Right.
So I want to kick it to Abby here, because Abby, you've always been very successful at these essays. So let's field that question. First, what motivates you to pursue your academic and career goals?
I think what motivates me the most is not only the people around me, my family and my friends, but I do volunteer work, as many people know. For me, I know that I'm blessed to be in this situation of being in higher ed, and I'm blessed to have the experiences that I have. So I think what motivates me is continuing to want to be better so I can continue to help other people, because I'm never done learning, and I'm never done learning about other people. I think at the end, that's what motivates me.
I love that, because I think one of the things that people maybe think when they're in school is, oh, as soon as I get out of here, I'm good for the rest of my life. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
No.
We have to be lifelong learners. I mean, it's expected, especially in our industry with communication, how quickly technology moves.
Yes.
And I tell them in class, the stuff I'm teaching you right now in 3-4 years might not even matter. I could be totally wrong, because the speed of technology moves so quickly. So I appreciate that you made that point, that it's such an important piece of being a professional. Yes, you're going to learn the skills now, and some of these skills are going to stay the same moving forward, but there's also a lot of things that you're going to have to keep up on.
And I think it goes deeper than that as well. I mean, even if, say, people don't choose the higher education route, I feel like you shouldn't be done learning no matter what stage of life you're in, because the world is constantly changing. And I feel like if you stay on that same path that maybe you were raised on, or the path that you were led to believe is true, then you become very closed-minded, and I feel like that'll shut off a lot of paths for you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now, Abby, I just want to follow up with that second question there, and I think this is fair to say. Because of our accelerated schedule, because of your job, because of your campus involvement and your volunteer work, in addition to other things that have come up in your life, how have you managed to stay focused on these goals over time and not let some of these things interfere with your long-term goals?
I think it's a big part of my parents always telling me it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to them. So no matter what happens in my personal life or what I do on campus, at the end of the day, it's still my grade that's going to get me to graduate, and it's still my experiences that I only have an X amount of time to have here. So I need to take advantage of that as long as I can, in any way that I can. So for me, it's that time length. And I mean, of course, campus is going to be here, but I got to do what I can while I'm here.
And I always make that point too, is that I think a lot of times when you're in it, it seems like it's taken forever. But when you look back, it's like, oh my God, that went by in a blink of an eye.
Definitely does.
Exactly. Yeah, because I can't believe that you're almost done.
It's
either.
unreal.
I know.
It's unreal. And
It is crazy.
It's so sad on one hand. Of course, I'm happy for Abby, and she's going to have a wonderful, wonderful career. But it's sad because, we value her so much here and think so highly of her. So one final thing I want to talk about before I make a quick plug for an event that you're having later this year.
Yes.
Abby last summer got to work with you in an intern capacity.
Right.
So I just want to get a little feedback about what it was like with your experience working with Abby, and then I want to ask her the same thing.
Well, let me tell you, I've had a couple interns. I've had a couple interns that I wouldn't want back. and then I had an intern last year that I thought, oh, she's really good. And then I got Abby. And I was like, okay, well, now Abby raised the bar, so no pressure on you, Paul. Professor Miller. No pressure on you, Professor Miller, but I'm going to need another one.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah. So no, what Abby says about giving back and growing, they are not just words. That they are not just words that come out of her mouth. That is truly the way that she lives her life. You could see that when she was doing the work. If I'd say to her, "Can we do this? Can we do?" She thought about it. She'd come back. She'd give me suggestions. She'd give me ideas. It was just great. I mean, we had a great time. Whenever I gave her a project, I didn't have to worry about whether it was done properly. Of course, I double checked it, but And then the other thing is that she's in communications, but communications have different paths that they have to go. Fundraising is very unique, and so I had the opportunity, and I hope that I gave her that opportunity and that ability to grow, to show different ways that you can communicate something through an article versus a plea to donate money. So it was that kind of thing. But yes, it was great, and the time went way too fast, and now she's going to be gone soon. So,
we still have her for 2 more terms.
I know,
so
but I won't have her as an intern for 2 more terms.
Well, Abby, I want to ask you again. It's been, my gosh, at least 5 months since you rode off into the sunset from your internship. What did you learn from getting to work with Sandy, both maybe personally and professionally?
Oh, I learned a lot. I really did. Sandy is definitely one of those people that if you are open to it, when you go into a situation, like, she'll be there for you. She is definitely that person. I think her job is so fitting because I just feel like she is the most giving person, and she will teach you anything you want to know. So for that, I'm so grateful because she was willing to teach me. I had so many questions because I wanted to go into nonprofit after I graduate. So I was asking her, I think, every question possible for each new project we did. But she answered them all. So I'm just grateful.
That's one thing about Sandy. She's never going to tell you she doesn't know something.
No.
She's going to dig back in here somewhere and find you an answer.
And if not, she will Google it, and we'll figure it out together.
That's right.
Well, I'm so happy that both of you had the opportunity to work with one another. As much as I respect you, Sandy, it was wonderful to have the opportunity to give Abby that opportunity to work with you, because I know that it was valuable. And I know it's something that she wants to get into in her career. And of course, you being here and being such a wonderful mentor to Abby, I think is just so wonderful. So, well, before we get out of here, we have to give the plug for a save the date for the Central Penn College Education Foundation Golf Open that's going to take place at Rich Valley Golf on Friday, August 9th, the 53rd annual Golf Open. I am so excited for this. Of course, it's the highlight of my year every year to get to go out there with my students and other faculty and staff members to play on our team, and just really, really looking forward to it. So save the date for August 9th for the 53rd annual Golf Open.
Best Golf Open around.
I've played in a lot of tournaments, Sandy, and yours by far is the best. And I mean that in no disrespect. I even put on my own tournament, and your tournament still puts mine to shame.
It's just a lot of fun. That's it. People ask me all the time, so Sandy, do you golf? No, I do not golf. I throw a party around golf. That's what I do. I'm not changing shoes. I'm not carrying a bag, but I will make sure that you have a very, very good time out on the course. For an absolutely great event and a great purpose, which is to raise scholarship dollars for Central Penn College students. What a better way to spend your Friday and your money.
Well said.
In August.
And hey, she'll still be here over the summer.
know.
You can maybe
That is
see if she
true.
wants to pitch in for the Golf Open.
Sounds good.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. Again, I just wanted to remind you, the scholarship application is open between February the 5th and March 1st at foundation.centralpenn.edu. The question is, what motivates you to pursue your academic and career goals, and how do you stay focused on them? And of course, Abby gave you a couple of tips that you can follow to put that in. Again, you can ask people in the hub, you can ask your professors.
Right.
We are here for you. We want to support you. We want you to turn in the best essay possible. And of course, we're going to save the date for August 9th for the Golf Open.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Well, Abby, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences. It's always a pleasure because, again, you're just an all-star, and I think a lot of people could do worse than looking up to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Sandy, of course, it's always a pleasure. And we'll have you back in the summer, and we'll talk about that Golf Open, and we'll talk about the next scholarship application that opens then.
Sounds great. I can't wait.
All right. Well, it's been my pleasure to have Abby Bresky and Sandy Box on today talking about the Education Foundation Scholarship. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For Professor Paul Miller, we'll see you again next time.
Greetings, knights. This is Sir Will, your mascot, and you're listening to the Nightly News Podcast. Huzzah!
Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I'm so honored to be joined by our Associate Professor, Tom Davis. In addition to being Associate Professor, Tom is also the Director of the Center for Teaching Excellence here at Central Penn College, and one of the many things that he does as part of the CTE is helps not only share important articles about artificial intelligence to faculty, but also mentors individuals on writing AI policies for their class. So, Professor Davis, Dr. Tom Davis, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Well, we're also being joined here by Nightly News reporter Noah Lopez. Noah, welcome back to the show. This is your second effort here in the podcast studio, so we're looking forward to what you have to say about our topic today.
Thank you so much as well.
All right, so what we're going to talk about here today is a topic that has been a buzz in higher education really over the past, I'd say, year. Certainly before that to a certain extent, but it was all the way back when this sort of gift, I suppose you would say, was released onto humanity, and that gift we're talking about is ChatGPT. Of course, there are a variety of other artificial intelligence platforms that have since been rolled out on other. Microsoft has them, Google has them, Apple has them. There have been other types of chat output GPT-type products, but just for the sake of today, let's kind of just focus on GPT. We can, of course, toward the end, we'll get into some other types of artificial intelligence that exist. But just generally speaking, let's talk ChatGPT. As I remember this, Dr. Davis, this really came out of nowhere. I mean, I guess to a certain extent, we had to think that something like this was going to come at some point. But it was just one day this thing opened and it hasn't closed. You know?
It was a Pandora's box, so to speak. Yeah. I mean, for the longest time, we've had other forms of artificial intelligence kind of pop into our everyday lives, right? If you've ever chatted with a automated service representative that has kind of replaced good old-fashioned one-on-one customer support. You've also, used telephones to call offices, and it based on the inputs that you're using, it routes you to the right. So artificial intelligence in that regard has been around for a while. We're pretty comfortable with it, but round about October of 2022, all of a sudden, OpenAI just thrust ChatGPT version 3 on the world, and in certain circles, they may have seen this coming, but to the average person in the public and even in the higher ed sector, we were not prepared for this.
And it's very difficult to really describe how quickly this was adopted. One of the things that I've personally been doing is, trying to do some of my own research on this and just learning more about this. So Adam Conover from Adam Ruins Everything is one of my favorites and has his own podcast in which he has had multiple people on who have been involved in the artificial intelligence scene that have talked a little bit about this. Now, he calls it for what it really is, and essentially what it really is just text output. It doesn't understand what it's saying. It's just basically searching through all of the information that it's been fed and putting out text. And of course, one of the biggest issues now is, let's just say, the information literacy piece of it, right? The citations it gives are false and made up in many cases, and even the information that it gives us off is certainly at a minimum biased, depending on who's feeding the information, and at a maximum, but highly, highly likely to potentially spread misinformation at some point.
Yeah, and what's crazy is the programmers, the people building this, aren't quite sure to this day how it hallucinates in the way it does. That's actually the technical term they use for it, where it will generate sources that don't even exist, but nevertheless sound as though they could exist, right? So you might have, people might have it generate a list of in-text citations, and it'll generate like a title that makes sense. It'll say it's from the journal of whatever volume issue. And you would think that's totally legitimate until you search for it and you discover that journal doesn't even exist.
Not even real?
Not even real.
So you can put something in the ChatGPT and it can fabricate something almost non-existent.
It can.
It not only can it does.
It often
that's
does.
what happens. There are some workarounds for that in terms of trying to get better sources, but it's, obviously I want to talk about some of the challenges that have come with this. But now, Tom, when this first was rolled out, how did you kind of respond to this? I mean, obviously as a professor, and I think there are two camps here, like how can we use it to benefit us, but also what impact this has had on higher education. So when it first came out, what was your impression of what happened and what was going on?
My first impression when it came out is, wow, this is pretty neat. But also knowing at the time that it's based on a large language model and, as you've mentioned, it doesn't understand necessarily what you're asking it. It just generates outputs based on probability. And so what it does is, a simple example I give, right? If I said Mary had a, you can very likely predict what the next two words are. That's kind of how these large language models work, only with very large language models. When it first came out, I was impressed by it, but I also knew what it couldn't do.
The limitations.
Yeah.
What are we talking about exactly? Are we talking about just 3.5? Because
Yes.
I've seen 4.0 can understand and it can learn as you put things into it. It can be like, oh, I know your writing style now. I know how you want things to be put in, and then it'll write how it feels.
But it still doesn't know what it's
doesn't know,
doing.
no.
Right. It's sort of a murky epistemological concept there. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't know what it's doing.
Just catching
because
algorithms.
because it is not AGI. Okay, or GAI. I've seen it referred to a couple different times, which is your generalized
Let's break that down. Let's break this down. So first of all, what is ChatGPT then for people who might be still learning about this?
So ChatGPT is simply just a chat-based interface that uses natural language processing across the large language models that it has been trained on. And so it can, if you prompt it certain things, it can basically just pull data. Now with GPT-4, it's pulling live from the internet now, which in some cases has broken the internet.
What?
I recall recently I did a search for a film in Google, and it brought up the cast and had the pictures of the cast members, and all of the pictures did not match the actual cast members' names. And digging into that, they're saying it's basically because of the way that some of these artificial intelligence models are now pulling stuff from the internet. It's actually causing errors like that to happen. They're not really sure how that's happening at this point, but when you think about it, it's like, wow, so these things can cause problems with Google? Evidently they can.
Wow. So, and then you mentioned AGI. Now, what is the difference between that and what ChatGPT is doing?
So when we think about the robot holocaust, right, what people are generally thinking of is general artificial intelligence. And that would be the sort of artificial intelligence where you would not be able to tell that it is an artificial intelligent agent because it would be so human-like that it's like a one-to-one core. They call it the singularity, right? It would be sort of a one-to-one correspondence. We're not there yet. Now, lots of people have predicted, folks like Asimov, lots of others have predicted that we might see GAI by around 2050. However, that has been pushed up simply because of the paradigm shift that ChatGPT and language-based artificial intelligence models has kind of brought along now. So it might not be 2050, it might be more like 2030. And that can be scary. It can also be exciting. It's going to necessitate a tremendous societal shift in terms of how we conceptualize work. We may be looking at a situation in 15 to 20 years where we don't have enough jobs to go around for people. And that's where things like universal basic income might start entering the picture, simply because robots don't need sick days. Robots don't have, their child's graduation to attend.
They don't need to get paid either.
They don't need to get paid. And so what was once thought to be a threat to blue-collar jobs is now a threat to many white-collar jobs.
I'd say. So, Noah, this is something that you're really interested in, and I respect you because you've got such a vast knowledge, even for still a young man. So tell us a little bit about what your interaction and involvement has been with not only just ChatGPT, but artificial intelligence in general. Like, what do you know about it, and how has this played into your life over the last couple years?
Okay, so when AI first came out, my father was kind of a innovator. He was part of the early amount of people, the 2%, that actually interacted with AI, and he was like, "Noah, look at this. This is so amazing. I can type anything, and it makes a goofy picture." That's back when it was just pictures. Like you could type in, give me a cat floating on a banana in the middle of the universe, and it would give you a cat floating on a banana in the middle of the universe. He was playing with that for a while, for the next month, few weeks, and after that, he showed me. He was like, "Noah, this AI thing is amazing. This could be the future. We need to get on this right now." And I was like, "Nah, you're crazy. It's just a bunch of goofy pictures." And now here we are. I was in high school, and my senior year, AI really blew up. Like, oh, everyone's using AI to do their homework. Oh my, you can just put this into ChatGPT and it'll give you the answers right now. I'm like, what? So I tried it out myself. And I think it was in the early stages, might have been still 3.0, not 3.5. But when I typed in it was a play in English class. I believe it was Macbeth.
I was going to say, it's probably either Macbeth or
Yeah.
Hamlet.
Yeah, it was Macbeth, all right? And I had to know what the three witches said. And I can't remember it anymore because...
I know it word for word, but I won't take up our time.
I know you know it word for... You probably do. I knew it back when I was learning, but I looked it up in ChatGPT and it just gave it right to me. And I was like, how is this happening? You know, and it was amazing to me because I was like, is it like Siri? Is it the same thing? Because I know Siri's an AI, and that's been around way longer.
Oh yeah, a decade at least at this point.
But it's not a large language model.
But what Noah's talking about here is really interesting, and I think it is a good segue to what our next topic is here. You know, one of the things that we have had to do in higher education, Professor Davis, is that we have had to try to figure out the parameters of this. And what I will say, and this isn't just of Central Penn, this is higher education as a whole, and in fact, I would look at other institutions as being more guilty of this than us. But frankly, higher education is slow. It is slow. It takes time because there's processes that have to go through, policies that need to be approved. And this is a situation where we are, as higher education faculty members, I'm not just talking about Central Penn College here, we are pushed into a situation where we don't have a lot of institutional support because nobody has come out and said one way or the other. And I'm not just talking about Central Penn. I'm talking about across the board. As a current student in my PhD program, I have not heard one peep from the institution that I go to about ChatGPT.
Yeah, a lot of schools are still kind of burying their head in the sand on this. And of course, an integrity violation, a violation of academic integrity is still a violation of academic integrity, no matter how you slice it. But the wider conversation now has become ChatGPT isn't going anywhere. Artificial intelligence isn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so the very nature of the skills that people need to navigate the world are going to need to be reconceptualized. And nobody wants to face that right now because it's frontier science, for lack of a better term, right? We just don't know, and we can see that kind of playing out now in the arms race between checkers out there, software that will help you determine whether or not a piece that you enter into it was written by AI or not. As we've seen, we ourselves here at Central Penn have already cycled through at least 3 of these. I'll share when a new one comes out with faculty, and it's like, hey, this one is 50% better than previous versions that have come out. But nevertheless, the issue of false positives and false negatives still pops up with this. And so lots of folks are saying, to give you an example, right? It used to be 6 years ago, the mantra was learn to code, learn to code, learn to code. There'd always be a future in coding. That's not the mantra anymore because now AI, you can just tell AI to code. Or for folks who already are coding, AI will check to make sure there are no errors in your coding, and if it finds those errors, it will fix it for you. So the very types of skills that we were preparing students for even 5 years ago may no longer be relevant.
Which is unbelievably sad. Now, when we think of our job as instructors of higher education, our job is really to your earlier point, prepare our students for the labor market when they're done. Unfortunately, especially in my area with communication, I mean, it's always so rapidly changing. And I share with my students in class now, like, what I'm sharing with you right now may not be applicable word for word, but the thought process that you go through always will be the same. I'll give you an example. Even though when I first got involved with social media marketing, this was before there were classes and courses and concentrations. But the bottom line is social media marketing is uses the same principles of marketing that have been used for hundreds of years. It's just in a different context. What's awful about AI is that we don't know what even 2 years from now is going to look like. When Noah walks across the stage in 2 years, we don't know what that job landscape is going to look like because this is so rapidly evolving.
Right.
2 years is crazy, like that close in the future, and you think it could change rapidly just that fast?
That's how the communication industry has always been, and this is even hyper amplified because of the buzz that went with ChatGPT and all the massive amounts of billions of dollars invested by Google and Apple and other tech giants in this technology.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that from a capitalist perspective, the continued growth of things like these chatbots and artificial intelligence makes a lot of sense. But it's the ethical side of the question that really needs more serious attention, right? I mean, if these machines, these forms of artificial intelligence can do certain things, it's kind of up to us to ask, well, should we be using it for these sorts of things? So yeah, like, opinions, perspectives, they really vary on this. And we tend to focus on, like in higher ed, right? Like the potential disruption to things like academic integrity. But then on the other side of the equation, in the UK right now, we literally have a cancer pill that is in human trials. And we didn't think we were going to get anywhere close to something like that for 30, 40 years. But what artificial intelligence was able to do is, researchers were able to feed thousands and thousands and thousands of different studies into this sort of thing. And ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, is basically able to recognize patterns that the human brain just would not pick up on because it can't keep that much in its memory, right? And so literally, like, the story is rather fascinating. They basically, after they were interacting with it, ChatGPT said, try these 5 compounds. And they did. They tried them. I don't remember which one of them was the one. But essentially, when they applied what AI was telling it to do, they learned about new ways that cancer actually originates in the body. It wasn't necessarily the way we always thought it was. And then not only that, GPT suggested these 5 chemical compounds, and sure enough, one of the compounds aggressively targets cancer cells, but leaves other cells alone.
Wow.
Which is not what radiation treatment or any of that stuff does, right? It has to indiscriminately kill cells.
Right.
So the idea that this new rise of artificial intelligence may in fact give us a cure for cancer in the next handful of years is flippin' insane,
Absolutely.
right?
So, I think as we kind of bring this all together, let's focus our attention on higher education at this point. The biggest issue that I believe that we're having as a faculty writ large around the United States and the world for that matter is that we are trying to teach students a variety of important concepts and skills that our employers have told us that the students need, one of which being basic writing and critical thinking skills. What do you think the impact is of a student who turns in ChatGPT for their assignments and maybe doesn't get caught? What impact does that have on them over time?
So, anecdotally, and based on some of the initial studies that are popping up now, those folks tend to get found out. And it typically happens on the job, right? So they start their career, they get hired somewhere, and they may be working in a group, they may be working directly with CEOs, whatever the case may be, and they may be asked questions, they may be given tasks that they're not able to go off and work on in private. And so what happens is they kind of reveal the gap that they have in the skills that the college degree they earned is supposed to certify that they have. So I mean, it's a very messy situation. I mean, people can potentially use GPT to get through college. It can pass the bar exam. It can do lots of different things. But I think those people tend to be exposed. Now, however, if the skills on the job start to fully embrace AI, we might be talking about a different skill set desired in our graduates, namely that they have an excellent command of AI, because it seems almost as though everything else would kind of flow from that.
Which I think is really interesting because one of the best articles I recall you sharing with us as a faculty had to do with sort of three different camps. It's either the all-in, yes, use it, here's certain circumstances you can use it in, and then there's sort of the old school perspective, like absolutely not, under no circumstance. Mm-hmm. And so this is part of the situation that is difficult for us as instructors, because in one class, say Professor Davis's ethics class, maybe it's all in, use it however you'd like to use it. And in other classes, say Professor Miller's media relations class, I only want you to use it for like brainstorming, editing help, that kind of thing, but not content generation that you're actually going to use. And then in Professor X's class over here on the other side, they might say under no circumstances can you use it. So I want to go to Noah here. Noah, I understand this is only your second term. How have you seen professors talk about this? Do they talk about it? And what are some of the policies that you see across the board?
To start off, what you were talking about, how professors do say, you can't use AI at all. And if I see you using it, it's academic integrity. It's like a violation of academic integrity, which I completely understand. It's almost like copying someone else's work and cheating, really. It's like looking up the answers on Google. It's like the exact same thing because it has pre-generated information, which kind of begs the question, where's the information come from and how's it getting it? But I'm not going to go into that. Professors specifically, I'll go for you for an example. You said only use AI when proofreading, grammar help, brainstorming. That's completely fine because I now have to pay for Grammarly. And it's pretty useful when it comes to that. That's mainly what I only use it for, because if I get a couple words wrong and I don't want to go in and, like, if it's a whole essay and I'm like, oh man, I messed up these commas, I'll put it in ChatGPT and it'll be like, here, I'll put the commas in place for you and do all that stuff. Sometimes it'll change the words and I'll be like, please don't change my words because it's my work. And it's like, please, only, like, it's once you've used it multiple times as a student in Central Penn, you can learn how to talk to it and you can learn what to say to it to get your desired response. Yes.
By that rationale, though, how are other professors maybe outside of me using it or talking about it, especially on that first day or in their syllabus?
I'll say in English class, a professor said that if you use AI, you're going to lose the skills that I'm teaching you, period. So if you keep using AI for all the assignments, what are you really learning? And I really understand that, because if I used AI too much, I think I'd be dumb. Like, I think I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'll be asked to write an essay and I'll be like, where do I start? Like, I don't want to do that. So that's why, for example, in English class, they're like, do not use this. You'll get a fail. You'll get a 0 in the class if you use this. If you're caught using this and we detected you've used it, it's donezo. You're out of here, pal. So from that standpoint, using AI can be beneficial. It can help you. But as a student, it's not really smart, because as he was saying, you get put into your desired field. Say you're a journalist and you're writing stories. They need you to write a story with the group and brainstorm, but you always use AI to brainstorm. So you don't know how to come up with your own ideas. You don't have any creativity, and you're basically stuck in this little box where you're like, well, how about you go first? But you're supposed to be the best guy. You have the biggest resume, you know?
I just think for students across the United States, I think that this is just... I can't imagine how difficult it must be to, maybe one professor says you can, one says you can limit in a limited fashion, the other one says you can't. You have 3 classes. Like, to me, I'm hoping that this all kind of shakes out over the next couple of years, because from a student perspective, it's got to be unbelievably confusing. From a faculty perspective, my gosh, I don't even know what to do. I mean, I know I've created a GPT policy. I say, it's not to be used for copy and paste. It's to be used for maybe idea generation, editing help, but that the work that you're ultimately turning in should be your work.
There's a lot of oversimplifying that goes on with this too.
I want to say something from a student standpoint. Using AI with work generation, it can be tempting to just use it every single time, because when you have lots of work piled up, you're like, man, if I don't do it, I can just use ChatGPT to write it out. Maybe I just will and just skip this class. But in the long run, it's gonna screw you over, because you don't do your work, you don't learn, and what are you in college for? What are you paying for? It can go to other higher education. Say you're trying to get your doctor's degree, right? Say you're working for that. You've been working and working. You're working. You have a family, you have a job, and this one day, it's this final big document you got to turn in. You're like, well, I'm gonna pay for ChatGPT 4 and have it write it for me. It's not. No.
I agree. So I think it's fair to say that higher education has changed because of it, needs to change with it.
I recall what I was going to say now, too. It's an oversimplification to say that, we just need to embrace it. Because the oversimplification is that, if we embrace it and the students can use it and they know ways they're going to use it, as though that's going to stop them from using it from cheating.
It's not,
right?
It's not going to stop.
Because there are still going to be students who are like, whatever, this thing can still do my work for me. So even if we fully embrace it and, and we encourage its use with strict parameters, that doesn't guarantee that students still aren't going to go outside of those parameters and complete, academic dishonesty. And it kind of goes along with what's known as digital amnesia or the Google effect. I think that's worsening.
What, that people can't actually remember anything?
Well, yeah, because in many cases, you don't have to anymore, right? Like the Google effect was more like students are likely to tune out those aspects of lectures if they know they can Google that information later. And now it applies the same with AI, except they're able to outsource their thinking. And to me, that's a lot more dangerous.
I just can't help but think of The Matrix. I mean, I know that we're talking about a movie 25 years old this year, and maybe The Matrix sort of oversimplifies this, but the sort of idea that we are sort of the living hosts of making. When you look back at what The Matrix actually was, it was sort of this world, this dreamland of a simulation that you're just dreaming what you're seeing, and
very Cartesian.
The robots are manifesting your energy in order to continue their life. I mean, if we continue down this path, that is what's going to happen in one way or the other, maybe in a less aggressive way, but it's going to happen. And so this is what's, I think, comes back to this idea of ethics. With only, a couple minutes left in the show here, Tom, let's talk about some of the ethical considerations of AI and maybe some of the discussions that you have with your students about this topic.
Yeah, because so some of them will ask me, well, can I use ChatGPT and just cite it? And so APA has come out with a rule for citing it,
which I am still blown away by.
Yeah, because philosophically, I have a major disagreement with this, right? There's a rule for citing it, but it didn't necessarily create its own original work. It is pulling it from elsewhere.
And from a communications person, the copyright implications on all this stuff, we didn't even touch on that.
Mm-hmm. How did they, I want to know how ChatGPT got the permission to put people's books in there, because I heard some authors are like, don't put my book in that robot. I don't want it in there.
There are lawsuits currently pending about this.
I have a question, actually,
because the creators of GPT basically said, well, our model kind of relies on that stuff being available and us being able to do that. So you're gonna stop us from doing all this good by seizing upon that, right? That's kind of the comeback. Yeah, go ahead.
So I wanted to ask, I know this is kind of crazy and extreme, but in the future years, maybe in, let's say 2030, like you said, which is
6 years from now,
crazy close. But do you think that people should stop updating AI, maybe to a certain point, so that it doesn't reach the levels of, say, I know it sounds extreme, but Terminator or Ultron, where it says, humans are kind of imperfect and we should kill them all? I know it sounds crazy, but if a robot actually sees it and they're programmed to see imperfections and perfect it, if they see that humans, they make so many mistakes, nuclear bombs, wars, they're like, we should stop all of this. And what if the AI becomes conscious.
Yeah, it's not crazy.
Yeah.
Several prominent technology people, right, have called for this, for a pause, a moratorium on developing this further, because we're still trying to get our hands around the implications of GPT-3 as 4 is out. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention things like Claude, right? There are so many other versions out there. And even ChatGPT, you can now, in the advanced version, you can get GPTs within it that are designed for specific tasks.
You can do that?
Yes.
What?
So this is such an interesting discussion specifically to higher education. The bottom line is I don't really think we've come to any type of conclusions here today, because we're still just learning. And the problem is that we in higher education aren't ever going to be able to keep up with technology. We can try to keep one step behind it, but we're never going to be even equal to it or ahead of it. And so we're always going to be fighting this uphill battle. So Dr. Davis, thank you so much for your time today and sharing with us a bit more information. If people are interested in learning more about this, especially in the higher education realm, where do you recommend that they go to find some quality information?
Well, there are a lot of different outlets that you can kind of stay up on this. I'm rather partial to groups on social media with other educators who come together and share this sort of thing. Honestly, at this point, it's useful to use Google News and just search for what are they talking about with this today, and kind of following along with that. But then other outlets like Inside Higher Education are publishing stuff about this all the time. Magna's Faculty Focus, there was just an article that came out this morning that I didn't share with faculty yet. Again, talking about this issue again from another angle. There are large-scale studies that are underway with this, related to not just higher ed, but so many other sectors. It's simultaneously exciting because of the things it can bring on, but again, we may be getting ahead of ourselves with things
I think that's fair
in
to
terms
say.
of our ethical dimensions that we still need to figure out with this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for your time. And Noah, thank you from a student perspective. And I know that you're very interested in this topic as well. So as always, man, you do a wonderful job. You're very, very intelligent in your discussions, and you fit right in here on the Nightly News Podcast. So thank you for your time and your commentary today, Noah.
Oh, yeah. No problem. I love coming on here. The podcast is awesome. And I'd love to see what's going on with that lawsuit. Like, what if that stops ChatGPT? Like, what if they get sued and they have to stop their program?
It remains to be seen.
TBD.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. I'd like to thank Dr. Tom Davis, the Associate Professor of English and the Center for Teaching Excellence Director, for being here today, as well as Nightly News reporter Noah Lopez. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being on today.
My pleasure.
My pleasure.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For Dr. Davis and Mr. Lopez, this is Professor Paul Miller. I'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.